So my name is Anastasia and I think house surgeon is the preferred term now at Dunedin Hospital. So I'm in my first year as a doctor, I'm finally getting paid. And I'm just here to talk to you about life-altering circumstances and the end of life. Just to clarify, by life-altering circumstances, I mean anything from a terminal cancer diagnosis to I have arthritis in my ankle and I can no longer garden, and that's really impacting on my life. So it's the full spectrum. So this project that we've done was inspired by the idea that concepts around death, dying and the life-altering circumstances are extremely difficult to discuss with patients, particularly if you think it's not relevant to that patient. Like, I feel personally as a clinician that I'm less inclined to talk to someone who's broken their ankle about how that's impacting their life versus someone who's got a terminal cancer diagnosis. I'm more likely to talk to someone who has cancer about what it is that they're really wanting to do with what they have left of life. So having these conversations is often not considered in those cases with low mortality or risk, especially due to time constraints. As some of you who might have been in hospital know, we kind of run around in a little group and visit you and then promptly run off again. And the conversations are definitely limited by time. So what we did was we created this pamphlet as a way to just open that conversation. The idea we had was that we might leave these pamphlets beside every single patient's bed so no one felt singled out, and if a patient wanted to, they could pick it up and think about some things that they might like to do. This is not around the specific intricacies around the end of life, around CPR and withholding medical treatment. It's more about what is it that you as a person really want to do, like what is important to you. Sorry, I've just lost my notes. So we were unable to actually pitch this project to patients initially because the ethics committee was quite worried that we might frighten the patients into thinking they were going to die, which they are at some point. That was kind of the point behind the project. So what we did was we pitched it to health professionals and students instead to get some feedback on how we could improve it. We managed to get feedback from over 300 people, which was amazing for a survey especially. And the response was incredibly positive, with 70% saying that absolutely all patients should get something like this, regardless of where they were on the patient journey. So not just people who are actively dying, but everyone in hospital should be able to consider this. And also the health professionals and students felt that all patients should have more opportunities to consider what it is that's really important to them. This is the final version of the pamphlet, which we modified after the responses from 300 plus people, which was incredibly detailed. People commented on everything from the font to the fact that having a Pahuta Kawa picture on there was a bit too nationalistic and they didn't like our colour scheme, so it is as good as we could possibly get it at this point. This is the other side of the pamphlet, and on this side we were just hoping to get people to consider whereabouts they are in life and where they might be going, and also some ideas around things that they might like to do. In particular, that little line about thinking about your spirituality, which got the most responses in the survey. So we had over 300 responses in total, and over 150 of those people decided that in the comments box at the end they wanted to discuss that one line. It was everything from, I don't like that God is second in that, and I feel that God has been given a more important place than the other things in that box, and I don't like that God has a capital letter, and I think that you should have mentioned the Christian God in particular. It was amazing, the stuff that people commented on. So that's about as good as we think we can get it at the moment with that wording, but it really shows how important that idea of spirituality was to everyone. And at least it got them to consider it, even if they didn't like it. So we finally got to the stage where we've been able to pitch this pamphlet to the patient population. So what we did was we went to outpatients over 2 weeks in vascular and renal in Dunedin Hospital and offered them the pamphlet and the opportunity to talk with us if they wanted to. We got an amazing response rate. We only missed out on 2 patients that were in outpatients that day, and that's because the consultant forgot that we were running the study and didn't pitch it to them. So we got 32 vascular and renal outpatients, and we also pitched the project in aged concern in Dunedin and a GP practice. To up our response rate, we limited the project to a 4-question survey so that people could just go down and tick and fill in the comment box if that was something that they were interested in doing. So those are the questions there that we asked people. How comfortable do you feel thinking about those life-altering circumstances or the end of life? How useful do you think this pamphlet would be to you? How useful do you think it would be in thinking about what you would like to do before you die? And how helpful do you think it would be to have the opportunity to talk to a counsellor? By counsellor, what we meant was that we had set up a counselling service made up of retired medical professionals that could just be there to sit and listen to people and what was important to them, because we are quite time limited in the hospital and we wanted to give people just something. So this is what we got. Patients were actually extremely comfortable thinking about life-altering circumstances and the end of life, with only 8% of them feeling very uncomfortable with it and another 8% feeling just uncomfortable. This was quite reassuring to us because we did have that comment from the ethics committee that we might really upset the patients and they wouldn't feel comfortable with this at all. And then, how useful do you think this pamphlet would be in helping you initiate conversation about the end of life or life-altering circumstances? Most people thought it would be really helpful to them, and only that 5% there thought it would be unhelpful. And just on that 5% there, they actually commented in the comments box at the end it was unhelpful to them because they'd already considered it. So that was pretty good. And here we have, how useful do you think this pamphlet would be in helping you to think about what you would like to do before you die? Again, people were very positive. That 5% that thought it was unhelpful, they had very practical considerations, so they were more interested in the actual, I don't want CPR and I don't want medical treatment at the end of life, which is not really what our pamphlet was trying to do. And then, how helpful do you think it would be having the opportunity to talk to a counsellor? Most people thought it would be very helpful, but there was actually quite a large percentage that thought it would be unhelpful. Those people in particular said that it would be unhelpful to them because they had family and friends that they would like to talk to, so they didn't like the idea of talking to a separate person, separate from their lives. But a few of them did comment that it would be helpful for other people just as something to have, but that they wouldn't engage with it personally. So we were particularly interested in those uncomfortable few people that really didn't want to think about life-altering circumstances or the end of life. But actually, of those people, 4 of them still felt that the pamphlet would be incredibly helpful in helping them initiate that conversation about what it was that they really wanted. And 4 of them thought it would be helpful in what you would like to do before you die, and of those 2 thought it would be helpful to talk to a counsellor. The rest of the responses were not negative, they were actually I don't knows. So that was really reassuring for us. Multiple people chose to fill out the comments box at the end of the survey, and most of those comments were around the pamphlet and the counselling service being a great idea. And then again, just like the clinicians, we had comments about the formatting of the pamphlet, and again, people didn't like the colour scheme. Just can't please everyone. A few people also felt that the pamphlet should suggest specific things such as wills and organising things with banks in the event of death. And actually, there were no comments made from the patients about the spirituality section of the pamphlet, so they didn't quite pick it apart like the clinicians did, so that was good. In conclusion, 73% of the participants felt either comfortable or very comfortable thinking about these difficult topics, which was so reassuring to us, and 81% thought that the pamphlet would be helpful or very helpful. 60% felt that talking to a counsellor would be helpful, and overall feedback was very positive. So what next? We found that it was far better when we had someone in each area to drive the project, but that, which we felt affected our response rate. So we actually didn't have anything from the GPs because the GP that we wanted to run this project with was away, and no one else in the project, no one else in that practice really wanted to touch something about spirituality and the end of life, because those are terrifying topics and we don't want to go there. The counselling service, while a good idea to the patients, wasn't sustainable just because we had to coordinate volunteers and staff, and it was just incredibly difficult. And we really needed to have a local person to talk to patients about their options. So in outpatients, that was me and some of the nurses in outpatients, but at Age Concern, they didn't always necessarily have someone around at the time to talk to the patient. And we also felt that this should be available to absolutely everyone throughout the patient journey, regardless of whether they're at the end of life or they're just in hospital or something like a broken bone. Cool.
Thank you very much for that. And as usual, we've got about 5-ish minutes of questions, maybe a little bit more.
Thank you. I'm just a master's student in Dunedin. The chaplains here at the hospital, it's a really great chaplaincy service. Do they have any discussion with you about the amount of conversations that they have around end of life?
Yeah, so we did work quite closely with the chaplains in the hospital in formulating that pamphlet, and they were quite happy with the idea that someone might view it and then contact them through the details on the back. So instead of having the counselling service, what we're going to do is we're going to divert people into the existing services, because a lot of people just don't know they exist.
Hi, I'm Cheryl. I run a visiting service for older people in Tauranga. I have come across your pamphlet idea in Tauranga, and when I saw it was going to be presented here, I was very excited, so I want to hook up with you. Do you have any connection at the moment with the more formal choices at the end of your life, options that are out there?
No, we don't have anything with that at the moment. What we do have is we're just linking into the advanced care planning, and we're trying to link with palliative care in the hospital as well, just if people pick up the pamphlet and they want to go in that direction.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Kia ora, thank you for your presentation and for the research, very rigorous. Fascinating that twice, though, you mentioned this notion of too terrifying to talk of, both by the clinicians and then within the GP circles. I wonder if you kind of just comment a little bit more about that and its relation or non-relation to spirituality.
So end-of-life care, life-altering circumstances and spirituality are areas that are viewed by quite a few clinicians as you don't want to go there, you don't want to offend anyone, you don't want to scare people into thinking that they're going to die, even though like everyone is going to die. And what we found was when we surveyed the clinicians, a lot of them said, yes, I want people to be scared, people need to know that these are going to happen, they need to actually consider what's important to them and what they want to do with their lives. And then there was a smaller but also quite loud group that said, no, you can't do that, people shouldn't ever be worried. We don't want them to consider this because it's not relevant to them right now. Yeah.
Yes. It's just picking up from what you were asking then. I mean, I've read quite a few articles where people have said that doctors don't like to introduce patients to the concept of death because to them it seems like they've failed to keep the patient alive forever, you know, and they don't like mentioning the word palliative care because so many people think that palliative care means that they're going to die in the next 5 minutes. So it's naming things properly that's part of the problem, not just the actual concept of what's going to happen. But congratulations on what you've done. And I think not putting a particular God down is a very good idea. And also not making too much of an idea about death as well, because for some cultures that's a dreadful thing to talk about. Thank you.
Sorry, just wanted to ask how are you seeing the future of rolling this out? Have you got networks going in any particular fields? Or?
So with the Dunedin Hospital rebuild, there is actually a spirituality committee, which I'm super excited about. So they're having meetings about how we can make Dunedin Hospital a place that's more spiritual and it's part of the actual building and not just something that's off to the side and only exists in chaplaincy. We want it to be something that's more accessible for everyone. We'll start with Dunedin Hospital, but we would like to do more research around this just because we've only been able to do that small pilot group at the moment with the ethics. So, yeah.
Just a quick short comment. So I work part-time at the hospice as spiritual care coordinator, and even in that context, in the palliative care context, even many staff are still uncomfortable, even though that's our whole ethos of the whole person, are still uncomfortable talking about spirituality. So even in that role, there is discomfort amongst the other staff that I work with about it. So, you know, congratulations for doing that in a setting that's outside of hospice, which should be really comfortable with it. So, yeah, well done. I hope it really bears good fruit.
Any final comments, Anastasia?
Honestly, I'm just so happy to be able to actually present this project after doing it for several years. We were just so limited by that idea that spirituality and death are just things that really scare people, and it should be something that's normalised. It should be an everyday conversation.
Brilliant, wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Here's a very small token of our appreciation. Thank you for coming up all the way. Thank you.